I'm going to try and explain what does a Group Chief Supply Chain Officer do in a day. But for me to be able to do that, I actually need to create an average day that would happen within a year. So a Chief Supply Chain Officer firstly needs to understand what is the organization's strategy. He needs to then take the organization's strategy and develop a supply chain strategy. The supply chain strategy then also needs to be supported by supply chain policy in your organization. So you create the policy. Also, from the policy feeds your procedures and practices. So the procedures and practices, you create the procedures and practices, you then go out into your organization and you train the organization on these procedures and practices. Also, in a good organization, you have good governance. So your procurement policy, or your supply chain policy and your supply chain procedures and practices need control frameworks. So your control frameworks are basically broken down into two key areas. And one of the areas is around your critical financial reporting controls. So the types of controls that your auditor would want to go and verify in your procure-to-pay processes. So the strong governance lead here. And then also you need to get the organization to do control self-assessments, and you get your internal audit functions to go and audit your performance of these, and you go and review the outcomes of these. You also have business critical controls. So these controls that is not necessarily something the auditors will be interested in, but something that an organization's management is interested in. So you develop these control frameworks and you go and implement them in the organization. You obviously, on an annual basis, you will review your policies and procedures and controls to say, are they effective and do they need improvement? So this is now very legalistic process part of things, but that's the governance leg of the Group Chief Supply Chain Officer's job. And obviously the Group Chief Supply Chain Officer won't be doing this. You would have teams going out, developing these policies, developing these procedures, rolling them out and training the organization, and then reviewing the organization's ability to perform this. A Group Chief Supply Chain Officer is also responsible for the methodologies that is implemented in the organization around strategic sourcing and procurement. So there are various methodologies around how do you go out and what steps do you take within a strategic sourcing process, designing the strategy of how you are going to procure within a commodity or a category of commodities, and how do you develop these strategies, understanding global and local changes around the commodities, doing research, reading up, visiting sites, seeing new technologies, and then how does that going to impact you within your organization. You also have a strong view of, you do market analysis, especially in the South African context, to understand your commodity or your category within which the commodities lie. How transformed is that sector within the South African economy? And then to do market research to say, the size of my spend as an organization, how can I potentially influence what is happening in that sector? So, and then also to see how you can develop your sourcing strategy to bring the best of both in terms of best quality product at the lowest price, as well as achieving transformational empowerment and sustainable economic goals into this. Price benchmarking, absolutely fundamental in terms of what you're doing. But all of this is just details of the execution of transactions. The Group Chief Supply Chain Officer needs to have an understanding of what is the organization's demand. And demand is not what am I buying this week or what am I buying next week. Demand is the view of what are the commodities that I as an organization require within the next 12 months, as well as within the next however long your corporate planning cycle is. So TRANSNET has basically dual views. We have a long-term planning framework where we look at 30 years development. in terms of what infrastructure and what investments do we as an organization need to make to create capacity ahead of demand. In terms of what is the economic view of the freight logistics requirements of the country. Do we need new ports? Do we need new railways? Do we need additional pipelines? How are we going to facilitate this? How are we going to impact the market in terms of the ports and the work happening around the ports? Where's the new next economic development hubs going to be? Where are the new factories going to be built? What logistics infrastructure do they need? Then this gets equated down to a 7-year view. And the 7-year view is the more solid view where we say, okay, this is my demand plan for the next 7 years. So usually a corporate plan is numbers. Now, Group Chief Supply Chain Officer and the supply chain professionals need to work with the business finance guys, the operational guys, and unpack this corporate plan to be able to identify what are the commodities that we need to procure, what are the capital events that need to happen within the organization, what is the best way to source these capital events and these commodities. And we need to ensure that business operates seamlessly. When they need something to put into the ground on that date, it must be there. So that's why we need the demand plans, to plan what it is that we need. Also, for certain large procurement events, you have to plan the cash flows. So there's a very, very strong financial link in terms of understanding commodities and procurement events and how the cash flows from those events and what is those impacts in terms of your organizational financial status and performance, the ability to obtain funding. Then it is to break this down into procurement events. And then it is effectively managing and understanding your procurement events. You need to know what it is that you're going to market for. You need to know that you must try and consolidate commodities, reduce the number of contracts, the number of procurement events you have, but still provide the overall provision of goods and services to the organization. You need to ensure that the procurement events happened as planned. So you need to have a good understanding operationally what's happening. Also, you need to have a good understanding of, once you've procured the goods and services, how are your suppliers performing? You also have a very, very strong role that you need to play around engaging with your suppliers, supplier relationship management, engaging with them, developing strategic partnership with them, meeting with them. So all in all, it is, you need to be able to plan what it is you need to procure. You also need to make sure that what you're procuring is well governed. You need to ensure that your staff are trained and skilled to be able to do the procurement events in the methods that you want. Also, you need to have a very, very good monitoring and reporting. You need to focus on exception reporting. In procurement, there's multitudes of information that is being reported, but you can't look at all the information that is being reported. You need to have a look at the information that is anomalous. You need to have a look at the exceptions. So obviously you need to ensure that you put strong systems in place that can help you identify the exceptions. Because to try and sift through and create the exceptions yourself, you will spend your whole life doing that and doing nothing else. So it's good to look at systems to produce the exceptions, because then you can get the organization to respond to the exceptions. So there's a lot of things that you do on a daily basis. You're reviewing contracts, you're negotiating with people, you're negotiating with suppliers, you're developing negotiation strategies, you are engaging with the organization, you're engaging with the board, you are ensuring that your delegations are properly executed, ensuring that the organization understands the right levels of approvals. But also you need to ensure that you don't bog the organization down in red tape. So you need to ensure that you get the balance between control and execution. And then that is obviously a decision taken by an organization's board in terms of the more controls you have, the lower your risks are. The less controls you have, the higher your risks. So it is a balance, and as Group Chief Supply Chain Officer, you've got to provide guidance to the organization.